Now, before you dismiss this video, I have to mention this. I am a fan of Marvel Comics, I'm a fan of the MCU, I'm a fan of DC Comics, I'm a fan of superheroes in general, okay? So when I say that I am disliking the current phase of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that does not mean I hate the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I don't. I really enjoy the first three phases of the MCU. Granted, there are some films I enjoy more than others, but overall, I'm a fan of the MCU. I am. But just because I'm a fan of something does not mean I have to be blind to its failings, its shortcomings, because I think once you start to address the failures or shortcomings of something that you love, then the people that are running said thing that you love can listen to that and maybe start implementing some ideas that I am suggesting. And as of right now, I'm currently finding Marvel Phase 4 to be quite lackluster, and it's not really gelling with me. I'm not loving a lot of the projects Marvel is currently putting out right now. And so I think the best place to start off is just to quickly give you my thoughts on the current projects in Marvel Phase 4, because I have reviewed most of them. There are a couple I have missed, and so I will be addressing them in this video. So yeah, I think that's the best thing to do. So starting off, WandaVision. WandaVision, I think, is a good show that just happens to have a very weak ending. I remember when it first started thinking the show was very interesting and unique. I loved what Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany were doing. I liked what the show was doing in terms of Wanda's character arc. I thought it was pretty good. I remember the penultimate episode, which was the flashback episode, being absolutely phenomenal. And then the finale was just a big CGI clusterfuck, and it all kind of fell apart. And because I thought the finale was so weak, I never really felt the urge to go back and rewatch WandaVision, and yeah, you're gonna notice that as a recurring pattern and theme I have with Marvel Phase 4. But overall, I thought WandaVision was good. Its best episodes were definitely the first three, and then the penultimate episode. Those I thought were the strongest. The episodes that sort of surround it range from either bad to fine. I still can't get over the Quicksilver reveal, just because it was so utterly stupid. Like, Ralph Bone... Oh god, and then the ending in the finale too, when Monica Rambeau lets Wanda go and somehow treats Wanda, who basically enslaved an entire town and manipulated them, accidentally torturing them. Monica Rambeau declares Wanda a hero, just... When it comes to The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I remember at the time really loving it. In fact, my review for it is titled The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Marvel at its Best, because I really enjoyed the spy thriller espionage. They were going back to the Winter Soldier Civil War tone, and I enjoyed that. But as the months have gone by, I still like it. It's just that I don't really feel the urge to rewatch it, and nor do I really care to. I liked the story of seeing Sam Wilson accept the mantle of Captain America, his dynamic with Bucky Barnes, their bromance, if you will. I enjoyed him finally putting on the Captain America costume and accepting his role as Captain America. I also liked the race issues they sprinkled throughout the show. The stuff with Isaiah Bradley was really compelling. But then the show does have things like Carly and the Flag Smashers, which weren't particularly great, and the finale, whilst it is much better than WandaVision's finale, is still kind of lackluster. Though I will say, and this is something I will defend about the finale, I've disliked how the internet, particularly Critical Drinker, has simplified Sam Wilson's speech at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. You know, his whole just do better speech. The speech is not Sam Wilson just going, do better. What he's saying is that the governments need to start looking inwards, being introspective, and start listening to the cries of the people, listening to what they want, and start figuring out ways to solve solutions that they can simply solve but decide to ignore. Sam doesn't have the answers, and nor should he have the answers, but he is the person that is willing to stand up and say, we have a problem and we need to figure out a solution. He's simply telling the governments of the world that action needs to be taken and conversations need to start happening. That's all he's saying. He's not saying, just do better, because I really, really dislike when people simplify his speech, because that's not what he's saying at all. Like, it's not even basic subtext, it's just the way he says it. He literally says, I don't have answers, but we need to start doing the right thing. Like, but at the end of the day, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier was a show I did like, and I am looking forward to see him as Captain America in Captain America 4. So Black Widow to me was a big letdown. Like, it's just an incredibly mediocre action spy thriller that just isn't really engaging. And the thing that really annoyed me about it was how Black Widow, Natasha Romanoff, Scarlett Johansson, a character we've known for 10 plus years in the MCU, feels like a side character in her own film, and it's like, why would you do that? The fact that the film is a prequel doesn't necessarily help, seeing as we know that Natasha died in Endgame. So instead of trying to make the film a good, interesting character piece about Natasha Romanoff trying to atone for her sins, trying to wipe off the red from her ledger, we instead get a pretty boring action spy thriller that just isn't really engaging. I mean, The final fight is terrible. The Taskmaster twist is terrible. Ray Winston as the bad guy was pretty bad. But there are also a lot of goofy moments in the film that sort of downplay the heavy subject matter. Like when they start joking about having their uteruses ripped from their bodies and all that stuff, like, it was weird. And not to mention, they didn't even show us the Budapest stuff. Like, they show us this really cheap flashback when it could have been something more interesting and dynamic, and just... Black Widow was just such a waste of a film. And even though we do get introduced to Florence Pugh's Yelena and Rachel Weisz as, what's her face? Does she have a name? I don't remember. And David Harbour's Red Guardian, they should have been the side characters, but for some odd reason the film treats Natasha Romanoff as a side character. It's very weird. I did have more things to say about Black Widow at the time, so if you want to know all that, just watch my review for it. Loki was a show that I didn't really gel with at all. To me, it felt like knockoff Doctor Who, it felt like knockoff Umbrella Academy, and it just overall felt odd for the character of Loki to be involved in this sort of weird multiversal sci-fi concept, when realistically, Marvel should be leaning more into the fantasy realm of Thor, but they're not. They made Loki a science fiction show. Huh? The storytelling in the show was also just pretty weak. I didn't gel with it, especially since the show doesn't really have an ending, because the final episode is just a massive exposition dump between Sylvie, Loki, and Kang the Conqueror. And that's kind of it. Like, it ends and it goes, oh, season 2. But I sort of sat there going, but you haven't given me a satisfying arc for Loki. He ends the season a different person, but I don't really feel like he's completely changed. Like, the character we saw at the end of episode 1, who saw his life flash before his eyes, who saw the Loki from a different timeline die, and wanted to change and become a different person, he kind of just stayed stagnant throughout the entire show, and the show was more or less just about Sylvie. Again, at the time, I had more things to say about Loki, so if you're interested in that, just watch my review for it. Shang-Chi is a film I like well enough. I think it's good. I think some of the standout stuff in it is mainly the action and Simu Liu as Shang-Chi. I love Simu Liu. Like, I recently watched Kim's Convenience earlier this year, and I loved that show, and I loved Simu in that show. I think Simu is fantastic, and he's great in Shang-Chi. I just felt like when it came to the film's story, it could have been stronger. A lot of the emotional family moments I feel could have been done stronger. Instead of focusing on this big CGI action-heavy finale, we could have had a very personal story between a father and his son. The big CGI stuff with the dragon and the Dweller in Darkness and all that just kind of detracted from the emotional impact of the story. Like, I don't think Shang-Chi is a bad film. I just feel like it could have been something more. Again, if you want to know my thoughts on Shang-Chi, I have a review on that one as well. Eternals to me was just incredibly boring. I do have a review on Eternals. It is quite long. But the thing is, at the time when I reviewed Eternals, I don't know if I was being too harsh on it or if I was being too, like, easy on it, because I've tried to rewatch Eternals. My family one night, we sat down and tried to watch Eternals. We only got about 15-20 minutes in. Basically, as soon as Kit Harington's Dane Whitman left, we sort of just turned off the film because it was pretty boring. The biggest problem to me was that it felt like it was two films smashed together into one, and the first film is the one that introduces us all to the Eternals at the beginning of time and all that, and we understand who they are and establish the family dynamic, and then the second film is all the stuff with Icarus and the Celestial and them trying to, you know, birth the Celestial from Earth and all that kind of stuff. To me, if they did two separate films and they had one that established the Eternals team and then showed us the finale of Eternals in a separate film, that could have been more impactful, but the way the film presents it, it kind of makes us go, care about these characters you don't know about, and I'm like, I don't care, and nor you give me stuff to make me care about them. I don't know, I didn't really care about Eternals enough, to be honest. Like, it's weird. To me, it is both really ambitious and also really uninteresting at the same time. I don't know. So Hawkeye was an interesting one because overall I thought Hawkeye was a pretty fun show. Like at the time I really enjoyed watching it. Like it's not perfect or anything, but I enjoyed the show for what it was. I mean, it does feel like it is just the Kate Bishop show and we should have gotten more stuff to do with Clint Barton. Maybe understand more about his character, his past, his history. The show is pretty much the Kate Bishop show, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love and adore Haley Steinfeld. Haley Steinfeld is just perfection, and I really enjoyed the Kate Bishop character. It's just that the show is called Hawkeye and we should have gotten to know more about Clint Barton as Hawkeye. I get that they're both called Hawkeye in the comics, and I like the dynamic that Haley Steinfeld and Jeremy Renner have. I like the dynamic that Clint and Kate have. It's just that the show could have done a little bit more in terms of developing Clint Barton. Oh, that being said, I do think Rogers the Musical was fantastic. Whoever came up with that idea is an absolute genius because it's just perfect. I can do this all day. Like, that was just so good. Also, one of my favorite parts of Hawkeye was Florence Pugh as Yelena. She was just so fun in the show. Like, she shows up and tries to kill Clint, and granted, it's not the most, tragic Shakespearean thing or anything, but she shows up, tries to kill Clint, and then her interactions with Kate Bishop is just fantastic. When she's all just like, oh, Kate the Bishop, you're fun. It was so good. She was so funny in Hawkeye. I loved Yelena in Hawkeye. But obviously, the biggest controversy, I'd say, of Hawkeye is Kingpin, because seeing Vincent D'Onofrio as Kingpin, whilst very exciting, a lot of people didn't like the way he was handled, and for the most part, I'm actually in the minority. I didn't mind how he was handled because, in a way, he felt like the way you would handle comic book Kingpin in, say, like a small Spider-Man story. Kingpin is there to get beaten up and arrested. End of story. But the problem is that when it comes to Kingpin, and specifically Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin, we kind of expect a little bit more in terms of writing and character because he's been in 3 seasons of fantastic television, and in Hawkeye, he's kind of just a throwaway cameo-ish. They deleted his best scene, which is the scene where he has dinner with Kate's mum and he's dressed in the black suit from Daredevil, and he's pretty much doing the Kingpin from the Netflix show. He's doing the whole, you're a woman of character. I admire that. I respect it. You're trying to get out. He's doing all that. That's fine. He's doing the Kingpin mannerisms. It's just that the way he is taken out in the show is very comic booky, and whilst I think it is plausible how he gets taken out, it's not like Kate Bishop overpowered him or anything. She just blew him up with an explosive arrow, and that made sense. Like, to me, that was fine. I think it's just the reason why there was such a massive backlash was just because people expect more because it is Vincent D'Onofrio. They want more gravitas. They want better and stronger writing because, again, he has been in 3 phenomenal seasons of television. This is one of the best Marvel villains ever to grace the screen. And it's not like I don't have my fair share of problems with Kingpin and Hawkeye. I mean, I do think the Hawaiian outfit was just a bit too much. And also, I just don't understand how he sort of fit into the narrative, because him sort of fighting the Hawkeyes in the middle of the night out in the street was just a bit dumb. Like, he only did that once in Daredevil, and that was when he was cornered in season 1 and the FBI were after him and he was trying to make his escape. But in the Hawkeye show, he is this sort of underground arms taxi dealer. What is he again? He has like a car rental place or something. But he's this sort of low-level thug that somehow just decides to enter the fray and fight the Hawkeyes just because. It didn't make any sense in terms of the character of Wilson Fisk, because that's not what the Kingpin does. The Kingpin only gets his hands dirty when he actually has to do something, or when he has been rumbled and is basically trying to make a getaway. That being said, I loved the sort of style of Hawkeye. I loved how it was sort of over-the-top comic booky and comedic. I liked it. I loved the tracksuit mafia, the bro. That was fun. Like, again, Hawkeye is not my favorite thing to come out of Marvel Phase 4 or anything, but I had fun with the show. Spider-Man No Way Home is the exception of Marvel Phase 4 because it is the project of Marvel Phase 4 that I have thoroughly loved and enjoyed. I saw this movie, I think, 4 times at the cinema. I loved this movie. Yes, it's got writing problems. It's got contradictions to the previous films. It's got plot holes. I know. But at the end of the day, it is a fun, fantastically enjoyable, heartfelt, rich story for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. It is just a fantastic film. It's a film that celebrates 3 generations of Spider-Man. It has them interact. It gives us 3 generations of Spider-Man villains interacting and gracing the screen. It gives me Charlie Cox back as Matt Murdock, and even though he's only in the film for like 1 minute, he is just perfection. The guy has not missed a beat. He just plays Matt Murdock so effortlessly and just... No Way Home is so good. I mean, again, I do have issues with it. It pretty much just negates the fact that Uncle Ben exists in the MCU because obviously Aunt May gives Peter the whole with great power comes great responsibility speech and all that. And some of the visual effects aren't up to snuff. This film should have looked much better than it actually does. But at the end of the day, I just love Spider-Man No Way Home. It sort of closed the chapter of the Home trilogy and has basically given us a new and exciting future for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. The possibilities are endless and just... I can't wait to see what they do with his character. It gave me back Tobey Maguire as Peter Parker, and it gave me back my favourite Spider-Man in Andrew Garfield. Some people say that they mistreated Andrew in No Way Home and that he was treated as sort of like the redheaded stepchild. I disagree. I think the film knew exactly what to do with Andrew Garfield. In many ways, he is the emotional core to the third act in a lot of ways. And I think another one of the reasons why I just love this film is that it really reinvigorated my love for Tom Holland's Spider-Man, because Far From Home just completely ruined it. And then I thought that Tom Holland's Spider-Man was just gonna suck and he was just gonna be this whiny loser. And then all of a sudden, in comes No Way Home, they give him a harsh and impactful lesson, and by the end of it, he feels like Spider-Man, and I'm like, this is the character I loved in Civil War and in Homecoming and Infinity War. And they fixed it. And I was like, okay, good. I can't wait to see what happens next. So Moon Knight is an interesting one because I liked it. I just think that by the end, the finale was just sort of flat. The first 2 episodes of Moon Knight I thought were actually pretty good. It felt like it was the MCU again trying to do something distinctive and unique. But then those middle episodes just kind of felt samey. I don't know. I wasn't as engaged with them. And then the finale was just, yeah, it was fine. It wrapped up. It was an ending. It's the standard MCU affair. You've got the big CGI fights, and then the hero versus the villain, and then it all wraps up, and then you've got the post-credit scene teasing the next project and all that. It was the same old shtick. It was also pretty weird in the finale where they suddenly gave Mark Spector this big, I'm not gonna kill you thing, when that wasn't really his whole thing in the show, because he was killing people left, right, and center in the show, and all of a sudden, he's suddenly taking the moral high ground in the finale for what? That didn't make any sense. That being said, the 5th episode was fantastic. Just give Oscar Isaac the Emmy. The episode where we see the backstory to Mark Spector and how he manifested the Stephen Grant personality, and how Stephen Grant was basically a coping mechanism for Mark to deal with his childhood trauma, was fantastic and really raw. Oscar Isaac just was fantastic throughout the entire show, and the episode itself just gave me the vibe that we got from the Marvel Netflix era of Daredevil. That episode made me believe that a Daredevil show with a similar rating could possibly work. And I am hopeful that we will one day see Oscar Isaac reprise the role of Mark Spector in Moon Knight, because he is really great as this character. I mean, hopefully the next time he shows up, he's actually in a proper costume, because one of my big pet peeves of the Moon Knight show was that every time he transformed into the Moon Knight costume, it just looked like a video game character. I was just sitting there going, that costume isn't real. Why did they not make a real costume? Why did they CGI over everything? This looks bad. But yeah, Moon Knight overall, I liked it, but Marvel really needs to stop doing these 6-episode miniseries because they don't work from a narrative perspective. You might as well just cut out all the filler stuff that is in some of the episodes and just make it a 2-hour movie. And now finally, we've got Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I have reviewed this one quite recently, so if you want to just check it out, it's up there. But also, I go into more detail in that review. But overall, I thought Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness was very well directed by Sam Raimi, but the script itself was just quite weak. It's nowhere near the big event film that Kevin Feige had been promising for like 2 years. I remember when he announced it, he was really hyping it up. He was like, this thing is going to be big. It's going to be part of a 3-story arc that happens between WandaVision, Doctor Strange, and Spider-Man. And we were like, oh my god, this is going to be so crazy. And then they kept building it up until the film came out, and it was fine. I'm not the person that is complaining, where are the cameos? Where are my cameos? I need my cameos. Give me the cameos. I mean, I would have liked to have seen a couple more cameos, but just to me, the script was just a bit unfocused. Wanda to me just felt a little bit one note in the second act, and in many ways she kind of just forgot about Vision, which was just weird to me. Like, in Wanda's ideal life where she's living with her kids, she doesn't want to be living with Vision, and I think the writer Michael Waldron just doesn't understand the concept of the multiverse, which is weird because he wrote Loki, but all of a sudden in Doctor Strange they're like, the multiverse isn't, branching timelines and alternate realities. Like, every decision you make branches off and creates a new timeline or a new multiverse. That's what the multiverse concept actually is, but all of a sudden in Doctor Strange it's, oh no, every time you dream something that is a multiverse, and it's like, wait, what? That's not how the multiverse works. So those are my thoughts on all the projects Marvel Studios has currently released in Phase 4. Now getting on to my problems with Phase 4. My first one, and this is pretty much my biggest problem, is there is no overarching story. The reason why phases 1, 2, and 3 worked so well was because they were all building up to something. Phase 1 was building up to the Avengers, Phase 2 was building up to Age of Ultron, Phase 3 was building up to Thanos, and because they teased Thanos at the end of Avengers 1, they realized that, we need to quickly, give a bit of conflict between the Avengers and we need to separate them, so we'll do Civil War. But when it comes to Marvel Phase 4, they're really building up to nothing. A lot of the post-credit scenes now, which back in the day used to be Marvel's tool for setting up the overarching story of the phases, has really been building up to nothing because it's either setting up a sequel for the film you've just seen, or it's just a pointless gag. And now that I'm currently on this, a big pet peeve I'm having with the MCU post-credit scenes is they keep putting the actual ending to the film as the mid-credit scene. Like, why do they keep doing that? Have the ending to your film actually be the ending. They did this in Spider-Man Far From Home, and I think they did this in Eternals, where the actual ending to the film is the first mid-credit scene, and it's like, what are you doing? Put your ending of the film at the actual ending. If you didn't watch the first mid-credit scene for Spider-Man Far From Home, then you won't know that he got his identity revealed to the public at the end of the film. As far as you know, the film ended as he dropped MJ, it cut to credits, and then you left the cinema. You didn't catch that Peter Parker's identity was revealed to the world. Like, why would you not have that be the ending to your film? Like, you can have the scenes interconnect so smoothly, but they didn't do... Why? Can they stop doing that? I mean, I'm not one of those people that leaves the cinema as the credits start rolling because obviously I stay and watch the post-credit scenes, but to the people that don't, they will have missed the actual ending to the film. So, Marvel, you actually need to start putting the ending to your films as the actual ending, you know, the thing that plays before the credits. The second problem I have is that the filmmaking and storytelling for Phase 4 has just been incredibly lackluster. Aside from Sam Raimi's direction in the Multiverse of Madness, aside from the first few episodes of WandaVision, aside from the first few episodes of Moon Knight and the goofy yet distinctive tone of Hawkeye, the overall storytelling structure of the Marvel projects all just feel the same. The story structure is the exact same, the style of comedy is pretty much the exact same thing, and a lot of the climaxes to the films have all just felt pretty stateless. Even when they have big massive threats like in Eternals when the Celestial is literally coming out of the Earth's crust, I didn't care because I knew at the end of the day the Eternals were going to win and stop the Celestial. And look, I understand this is a comic book film, it's a superhero film, the hero is going to win and save the day, but to me, the overall emotional stakes is what's also the problem in these climaxes, because sure, they give us the spectacle in things like Eternals, but I don't care that, say, Cersei gets stabbed by, the pixie midget girl Sprite. I don't care because she gets stabbed and that doesn't stop Cersei, she literally just gets up and then stops the Celestial. But then say you take a Spider-Man No Way Home where Peter is about to impale the Green Goblin with his own glider, but then in comes in Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man and stops him. That in itself is a very satisfying, emotional, character-driven moment. There is drama going on in the scene, there is character going on in the scene, and it works really well even though we know that Peter isn't going to kill the Green Goblin because it's Tobey telling Tom Spider-Man, we are Spider-Man, we don't kill. No matter how much we want to or how badly we need to stop Norman Osborn, we never kill because that's what Spider-Man does. And it's a fantastic scene because there is no dialogue to it. It is just a look exchange between two Spider-Men, and it's fantastic. Another one of my problems is that there is just simply too much MCU content. Nothing about the MCU feels special anymore. It is literally just project after project after project. Oh, you've seen this project? Don't worry, we've got another one coming in a couple of months. Everything about the stuff they have currently released just feels underdeveloped and undercooked. Even in a film that I love and adore like Spider-Man No Way Home, the visual effects aren't great. They could have had another couple more months to finish off the rendering. The script could have had another Passover to iron out the kinks. No longer do these big, massive blockbuster films look and feel like big, massive blockbusters. They just look unfinished. At the end of the day, it's just Marvel Studios releasing content so Disney can make more money, and that's kind of it. I mean, yes, that is the purpose of making movies. I understand that. But there used to be a saying, you know, quality, not quantity. If you're going to spend $200 million on a film, the film better be worth $200 million. The thing is that with Avengers Endgame, it felt like an ending. It felt like we were ending a story, a 10-year story, and we were putting these characters to rest. I mean, one of the lines of the film is, part of the journey is the end. And it's weird because I feel like Marvel Studios should be taking their own advice. They should really be winding down the MCU. I know recently Kevin Feige just announced that they were on a retreat basically planning out the next 10 years of the MCU, and I was like, really? you're still gonna go on for 10 more years? Like, let this end already. Like, what are you going to do? Like, sure, Fantastic Four is coming. Cool. Sure, we're gonna have more Spider-Man films. Okay. But what else? You don't have Iron Man. You don't have Steve Rogers Captain America. I don't know how long you're going to have Chris Hemsworth as Thor. And with the current upcoming Marvel Studios projects like Ms. Marvel, Thor Love and Thunder, She-Hulk, the trailers look good. I won't deny that. They do look really fun and entertaining. But is it going to be the same old cycle of, oh, the trailers and marketing are really interesting and unique, and then when you get the final product, it's just the same thing you've seen before? I don't know, maybe I'm cynical, maybe I just hate fun, but to me, if you are Marvel Studios, if you are the MCU, if you are the #1 cinematic franchise in history right now, to me, wouldn't you rather be someone that is very innovative and creative rather than just doing the same old thing because it sells? You look at the Star Wars sequel trilogy, and granted, the Star Wars sequel trilogy is very controversial, but you look at them from a visual standpoint. They are some of the best looking blockbusters ever to grace the screen in recent years. They all look fantastic. And they all look 1,000 times better than the most recent MCU projects. Don't worry, I'm not going to make this a massive rant about Marvel's color grading. I'm not Patrick H. Willems. But I do think it is a very important thing to point out because the Star Wars sequel trilogy has roughly the same budget as most of the MCU films that come out. And yet, they look 1,000 times better than the MCU films. But I don't know, I feel like I just expect more from Marvel, because back in the day, the storytelling quality used to be pretty good. I don't know if there is just an oversaturation of comic book content in general. There are so many superhero TV shows and movies, and also, the fact that Warner Brothers is trying to push DC in the more light-hearted direction, similar to an MCU, I'm not a fan of that either, because again, it just makes all the comic book films very homogenous. Like, I can't tell the difference between a DC film and an MCU film anymore, aside from maybe the visual style. Like, the Suicide Squad could perfectly fit into the MCU if the MCU did R-rated content. If you scale back the Suicide Squad to a PG-13, it could easily fit inside the MCU tonally. And a part of me is also quite worried about them trying to fit in the X-Men and the Fantastic Four into the MCU now, just because it feels like it's too little too late to bring in the mutants and the Fantastic Four. Reed Richards is an incredibly important and notable figure in the Marvel comics, and the fact that he hasn't been in the MCU for this long is just a bit weird to me. Same thing with the X-Men. But you also don't have Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa anymore. I think Shuri is now taking over the mantle of Black Panther, but still, people love T'Challa. T'Challa was being set up to be a very important figure in the MCU, and we don't have him anymore. It's incredibly weird to me, and in many ways, I feel like Endgame should have been that final chapter for the MCU. Give the MCU a couple of years to settle down and rest, and then relaunch the MCU with a new take, a new vision for the Avengers. Not necessarily doing something darker and grittier, but just something new, maybe something a bit more stylistic and pulpy, just to, freshen it up a bit. Robert Downey Jr. served his time as Iron Man. Chris Evans served his time as Steve Rogers Captain America. Scarlett Johansson served her time as Natasha Romanoff. Let the MCU franchise rest. Give us a new Marvel universe with the X-Men and the Fantastic Four from the beginning, and just make it something interesting and unique, I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the MCU is fine as is and I'm just broken. But it's undeniable for me to say that I am getting a little bit bored of the MCU. It is just the same story over and over again. I'm not in the camp that thinks that the Marvel films aren't cinema, but I do think there is something that is just off with them. But those are just my thoughts on the MCU, particularly Phase 4. For all I know, I'm in the vast minority. But what do you guys think about the current slate of MCU? Are you enjoying Marvel Phase 4? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. And until we meet again, I'll see you guys next time.